All right, so I just weighed my RC. If you haven't seen this little setup here, I've got a little YouTube short you can watch and kind of explain this, and we go over calculation, which I use an online calculator tool. But today we're going to install some brass and try to get closer to a 60-40 front-rear ratio. 60 front, 40 rear. This is not going to get us there, but it should get us a little closer. Okay, before we get started on actually doing the change, I figured I would show y'all. I've done the left side, and I'll go ahead and show you that just so you can compare. So there's our new setup, aluminum spindle is what I would call it, I guess. And then the portal cover is brass. And I went ahead and did that because from what I've read, these where the tie rods attach can strip out. So I wanted to go ahead and put an aluminum spindle. Now, you can see there's really no downside to the front. We've got the same clearance, but on the rear, we do lose a little ground clearance. So, you know, that lower point here sticks lower on the front than on the rear. And so, you know, it kind of covers, you don't lose anything really on that portal cover because it sticks, it's flush with, or it still sticks below versus the rear. The rear definitely sticks lower than the portal cover, than the stock portal cover. So lose a little there, but not a big deal. So let's get started. Okay, first thing we're gonna do is pull the wheel off with the right lug size. Little plastic caps, get those off. And of course I removed this. I will say this is a hyper tough tool set from Walmart, and I really like it. And I'll show you a little modification I did to it that to me makes it even better. I guess I'll show it real quick. So this is the hyper tough tool set. It comes with a lot of accessories, and right here it had a pick and a suction cup. Not really useful for RC stuff. So I popped this little tray out of here and glued a magnet to the back side. It had this little bump, and that fit a magnet perfectly. So I put all my screws right there. Works out really well. All right, pull the wheel off, and we're going to pull the spacer off, or the hex drive, whatever you want to call it. And behind this, let's get y'all closer. We've got a little pin. It'll be hard to see on camera. Little pin drive. See that? Don't lose that. That's what engages the hex. So pull y'all back away. Take these 4 screws out of the portal cover. I wonder if y'all would be better off to the side, so the screwdriver is not right in your face. I think that's better. We're gonna take these 4 screws out, and the kit comes with 4 new screws, but I think they're a little bit larger. I went ahead and used them, but they definitely thread in a little harder. Makes me think that the thread size is slightly larger, but so I went ahead and used them. Trying to get y'all in close. Alright, so we pull it off. And here's where we're going to just set this assembly down. Let's work with this first. So let's go ahead and pull this one bushing out. And we will replace that bushing with a bearing. I don't know if I mentioned this. I bought the kit. You can buy this kit with bearings, and that's what I did. So we're just going to set this bearing in. Okay. And I'll pull y'all back over to here again. And we're gonna discuss this. So I'll pull this out, this shaft, and what we've got here is we have the bushing in a little spacer. Now, I don't know if we should still run this. I looked in the parts catalog. Parts catalog, no, list bearings and not the bushings. I don't know if they're calling them, but they don't show that spacer. So I went ahead and just did away with it. That's up to you on whether you want to run it or not, but I did not. So probably should run it, but yeah. I could always add it back in. Definitely not going to trash it. So, as you can see, we've got several of these pin things throughout this assembly. And so, just don't lose track of them. Okay, so that goes just like that. And we're going to grab our gear here. And that gear has a notch that engages with that pin. And so that's engaged. And what I'm going to do here, this has got just a tad bit of grease from the factory. I've got some white lithium grease. It's a pretty thin grease. Be good for those bearings, but it also help hold that pin in. So I'm just gonna kind of rotate that around, and now we can slide our axle shaft back in. Like I said, I eliminated that little shim, but it's probably needed. But since it was not on the parts diagram, and the parts diagram listed bearings, thought, well, maybe if there's bearings, they don't use it. All right, so that's back in place. Now, as far as our cover, we're not reusing this cover, so we can leave the bushings in. But you can see this shaft also has a gear with a little pin in it. So just keep track of these little pins. And make sure when you put it back together, sorry about that, alarm set. When you go back together with it, make sure those pins are fully engaged in the gear and fully seated in there. You can rotate the shaft and make sure. So we're just going to slide this bushing off. Actually, let me just push it with the, come on, it's stuck. There we go. And once again, it's fully engaged. And we will get our portal cover. And let's go ahead and slide 2 bearings in. And I'm going to take and put a little bit of grease on those. Put a little grease on this one. And I'm going to put some up here on this, where this gear rides. And we're going to go ahead and slip this shaft in. Again, make sure that pin fully engages. And I'm going to put a little bit on the teeth of this gear. There. All right, so got all of our bearings in, put a little bit of grease in there, and we can slide this in. Just be careful, don't force it. You might have to rotate the gear a little bit. In there. And then just make sure everything seems to be engaged. All right, set y'all back off to the side so y'all aren't staring straight at the screwdriver. And we're gonna put our new screws in. And like I said, you could probably reuse your old ones. The length of the screws are the same. These definitely seem to, I mean, they start pretty easily, but they definitely seem larger, I think, because they definitely don't thread in as easily. So I feel like we're, you know, cutting some new threads. All right, we got our little pin drive. So the nice thing about this set, it comes with the tool to magnetize and demagnetize your tips. And it's super handy to be able to do that. Also came with some little tweezers, which are handy. I guess that just came from Walmart. I think it was $13. All right, we're gonna slide our spacer back on. Make sure to fully engage that pin. If you need to, you can put just a tad bit of grease on that pin to kind of hold it in. But for the most part, it kind of stays. All right, moving to the front. Front is similar to the rear. Got a spacer still. And the tiny little pin. I have not magnetized this tip yet, so let's use our tweezers. Let's go ahead and switch. Okay, so here, the way I like to do it, I like to go ahead and take this off. And then the next step I do is these four. So let's just go ahead and take these off. Okay, now let's just slide the cover off, and we can just pull the shaft with it. Okay, so here we've got the upper gear that's going to pull the shaft out of the axle along with the joint. And you can see that large bearing attached to it. And then we've got our other bearing in there, which, since I'm replacing this knuckle, we don't have to pull that bushing out. What we do have to do is take this screw out and this screw out. Now, if you didn't buy these and you're just doing the portal cover, of course you'll need to pull this bushing out and then just, you know, put your bearing in. And you wouldn't need to pull these screws out. So, one thing to mention, so in the way this works is, you know, this has to freely turn, and you've got screws that hold it in. Now, if this was just screwing through the plastic into the knuckle, then, or spindle, whatever you want to call it, spindles to me is the more correct term, you wouldn't be able to turn. You know, if you tighten this screw down, you wouldn't be able to turn. So what it's got is in this piece here is it has a little spacer, and that screw bottoms out to that spacer. And so that's, and then it tightens down, and then that spacer is what's turning. I guess this is technically the knuckle, and this is the spindle. So the knuckle, it tightens the inside, and this turns in the knuckle. Well, what I found, the kit comes with these new brass ones. The ones that are in here are just metal, you know, steel. And these are just, they're 0.2 millimeters shallower, I guess, from the, you know, from here to here, they're 0.2 less. And on the top, it was fine. But on the bottom, this knuckle, I'm gonna just call it a knuckle, you correct me if I'm wrong, it's thicker on the bottom, and it was bottoming out to the plastic before it was bottoming out this spacer. And it was causing that screw to bind on the plastic, and so it was locking up the spindle. And if you tried to free it up by turning, it would loosen the screw. So I just reused, it was fine on the top, but to me it seemed like this hole was slightly larger on these, and it was causing this upper joint to have more slop. Like if you tried to wiggle it back and forth, you could see the screw wiggling in here more than the stock steel ones. So I just reused the steel ones. I mean, it's not really going to make much of a difference between, you know, this little piece and the brass one, but yeah, just, I'll show y'all when we tear into it. So we're going to tilt it up and do bottom one, and then those little spacers are going to fall out. Well, the top one will, and that's it right here. So bottom one goes in like that, top one goes in like that. And then there's just a comparison between the two. And I did measure them. That's how I knew it was 0.2 millimeters. Okay, so here's where we are. We're gonna start off with our new spindle. And I'm just gonna go ahead and get it mounted first, and then we'll worry about doing everything else. And so, like I said, you've got this little guy. What I'm gonna do is just put just a tab of grease on it. And that's really just to help hold it in place, because it's gonna try to fall out. So now you can see it stays. So we're not fighting it. And we're just gonna slip this guy in here. Of course, we didn't remove the bottom one. We've got new screws. And the screws that come in the kit, they all seem to be the same size and length. So we don't have to worry about, you know, does this one go here? Does this one go here? That's tight. And let's get the bottom one in. And then just check this to make sure, you know, should easily turn. That's what I found using these, was that it was binding up, not turning freely, and it was binding on the bottom. And make things easier so this thing's not trying to spin around on us, let's go ahead and hook up our tie rod. Heim joint, whatever you want to call it, but it's serving as a tie rod. Ball link. And just make sure to get it started straight. And these are pre-threaded in, you know, bolt holes in the aluminum, so they should start easily. It's a nice quality kit. Alright, so we're going to pop our bottom bearing in. And give it a little lube. Okay, and then got this handy, and for here, let's go ahead and slip this bushing off. And slip our bearing on. And there's a little pin in there, so make sure to the bearing kind of, or the bearing slash bushing, whatever, kind of holds that pin in. So just be careful of that. So now we're going to slip this in, but I'm going to put a little bit of grease on the back side of this. Just a little. And you might have to rotate it around kind of to get that shaft to engage, but it should slip in pretty easily. And again, we will just check, make sure that's all engaged, and it is. You can see the drive shaft moving. So I'm just gonna put some around in here. It's gonna help get it in that bearing. Went a little overboard there, but it's fine. Okay, so now we've got our little axle here. Use that to push our bushing off. Slide that off. Again, make sure the little pin is engaged. And we're going to slide a new bearing on. And we will go ahead and put a new bearing in the housing here, upper part, and go ahead and put some grease on that. And I'm just gonna put some grease on here. Whole point of that is so some of that will work into the bearing. I have no idea if they have grease from the factory in there, but like I said, it's not gonna hurt. I guess if you're running a lot of sand or something, you might not want to do it, but all right. And I'm just gonna put just a hair here. We don't need much because we kind of overdid it on the top, so that should be more than plenty. I'm gonna line this up, carefully push it on. Get you off to the side a little bit. And we're gonna put these 4 screws in. Again, new screws from the kit. And of course, going into that aluminum housing, you know, they thread in super easy. Got a little pin. Let's see the hole on it. All right, let's get this thing on the scales, and I'll give you the final weight and distribution. Okay, I'm gonna write down the weight at each wheel and plug it into the little calculator and get our weight distribution. All right, let's talk about these numbers real quick. So I did our before numbers, and then of course here's our after numbers, and I use those scales, and there's an online calculator. I put a link in the description where I just plug the numbers in, and it gives you, I think it gives you the left and rear bias, and then you just subtract from 100 to get your right and front. Did a little YouTube short. I'll put a link to that as well, where I kind of explain this. But anyway, so our new weight is 463.719 grams. That's a gain of 52.759 grams. And that's low, fairly low weight. So that's gonna really help, you know, keep this thing stable. As far as, you know, our let's talk about one thing real quick. Our aluminum spindles here really do not, it's kind of a wash because they're really not much heavier than the plastic. I mean, I should have weighed them, but I didn't, but I don't think there's really much of a difference in them. And if you noticed, well, let's talk about the numbers first. So my goal here is to get low down weight, but I'm also wanting to shift some weight to the front. And we did not accomplish that. And I didn't think we would, but I wasn't too concerned about it because I'm gonna add some more weight in the front. We're gonna change out the servo mount. We're gonna put some metal links here, a metal servo mount. We're gonna add quite a bit of stuff just to beef up some things in the front, which are gonna add weight to the front. And then if I still need to run weight or still need more weight, I'm gonna put some metal spacers, wheel spacers, replace those with some brass ones, and that'll add a lot of weight to the front, and we probably won't run it on the rear. But anyway, so what we ended up with, we shifted our weight 0.98% to the rear. And so we lost, 0.98% to the front. And that is because if you look, now I had that just sitting on there. If you look, the brass for the front is trimmed out for this lower knuckle, and it's solid on the rear. So the brass weights for the rear are heavier. So we're adding more weight to the rear. So that's why we shifted more weight to the front. And like I said, the spindle is kind of a wash. It's really not, we're really not adding weight to the front with that spindle. We might slightly, or we might be losing, but it's pretty much a wash. So that's what we've got. So the main benefit here is that we gained low center of gravity weight. This is fairly low on the chassis, and that's what we want to do, is we want to put weight down low to help keep this thing stable. So that's it. Like I said, my end goal is to kind of shoot for a 60-40. So 60 front, 40 rear. And so we're gonna work towards that. We didn't help that this go around, but like I said, I'm not too concerned. I'm also gonna change the servo. So we'll have a heavier servo up front, and yeah, we're gonna add a lot of weight. So I think we'll end up, meeting our goal, or my goal. Anyway, thanks for watching. Leave a comment down below, hit the like button, and subscribe for more.